Well, a big question is how countries in the Middle East now respond to Nasrallah's death. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner looks at what might happen next.
This assassination has taken the Middle East one step closer, potentially, to a much wider and even more damaging regional war. Now, it's not inevitable, but what happens next depends on several factors. Firstly, what will Hezbollah do next? Its command structure has been decapitated, its communications sabotaged, many of its weapons destroyed. But it's vowed to carry on fighting Israel, and its members are baying for revenge. It still has a large arsenal of missiles, many of which can reach Tel Aviv. There will be pressure within its ranks to use these soon before they get destroyed. But if they do in a mass attack, then Israel's response could wreak havoc on Lebanon or even on Iran. So what will Iran do? This assassination is as much of a blow to Iran as it is to Hezbollah. It's already announced 5 days of mourning, and rallies across the country have taken place. It's already taken precautions, hiding away its leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, in case he too is assassinated. Hardliners will also be pushing for a response to this latest humiliation by Israel. Iran has a whole galaxy of allied militias around the Middle East. As well as Hezbollah, they've got the Houthis in Yemen and armed groups in Syria and Iraq. Iran could ask these to step up their attacks on both Israel and US bases in the region. But whatever response Iran chooses, it will likely calibrate it to be just short of triggering a war it cannot win. And what will Israel do next? Well, the one thing it's not doing is pausing for a ceasefire. It reckons it's got Hezbollah on the back foot now, so it'll want to press on with its military campaign until the threat of those missiles is removed. Short of a Hezbollah surrender, and that's pretty unlikely, it's almost inevitable we could see this. Israeli ground troops going into Lebanon. They've been training for it this week. Their priority will be to find and destroy those remaining missiles, many of which are underground. Going in will be easy, but getting out could, like Gaza, take months.
Frank Gardner. Well, earlier we were joined by our Middle East correspondent Hugo Bachega in Beirut and our correspondent John Donnison in Jerusalem. And I started by asking Hugo about the mood on the ground in Beirut and what to expect in the coming days.
Yeah, Gita, I think there is a tense, anxious wait here in Beirut and also across Lebanon. I think people want to see how Hezbollah is going to respond. No matter your political affiliations here, Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah are extremely powerful. Nasrallah, for 30 years, was the leader of a group that is often described as a state within the state here in Lebanon. Obviously, Hezbollah is considered a terrorist organization by the UK, by the US, many others in the West. But here in Lebanon, it is much more than a militia. It is a political party, has representation in parliament. It is a huge social organization as well, with significant support in Lebanon. So it is extremely influential, extremely powerful. There was shock here yesterday when the news was confirmed that Hassan Nasrallah had been killed by the Israeli military in that huge Israeli airstrike that happened here on Friday. So I think people are waiting to see what Hezbollah is going to do. Obviously, the leadership of Hezbollah has been decimated. Hezbollah has been extremely, weakened by almost 2 weeks of intense Israeli airstrikes. So we still don't know how this response is going to be. We still don't know the ability that Hezbollah has to organize a response and carry out a significant response. But obviously, despite those attacks, Hezbollah continues to be a formidable force. It still has thousands of rockets, including missiles that can strike deep inside Israel. It has thousands of fighters who've been to Syria, so experienced fighters. And the concern here in Lebanon is that we're seeing just the beginning of a wider Israeli campaign against Hezbollah, an offensive that seems likely to include a ground incursion into southern Lebanon to destroy the infrastructure that has been built by Hezbollah in the south and push fighters away from the border.
And thank you for that, John Donnison in Jerusalem. John, can you give us a sense of what the wider public and political sentiment is on a possible ground invasion? Obviously, there's different political views in Israel as there is in any country, but just give us a sense at the moment of where you think the public mood is.
Well, I think Israelis are much more united in their support for the war against Hezbollah than they are, say, for the war in Gaza, where many Israelis feel the government should be prioritising a ceasefire and hostage release deal. I think most Israelis welcome the campaign against Hezbollah. There was celebration here in Israel over the death of Hassan Nasrallah. I saw some footage yesterday from a beach in Eilat in the south of Israel where the lifeguard announced the death of Hassan Nasrallah, and a huge cheer went up on the beach. So I do think Prime Minister Netanyahu has considerable support for this campaign, and there is absolutely no indication that it is about to stop. I think Israel feels that it has the boot on the throat of Hezbollah, and it is going to continue to apply the pressure. Now, as for a potential ground invasion, well, that comes with risks. You'll remember back in 2006, the last time Hezbollah and Israel had a full-scale war, Israel went in with ground troops. It was eventually pushed back, and a large number of Israeli soldiers were killed. So there are risks, but I think many analysts believe that you cannot dismantle Hezbollah entirely without going in with troops on the ground.
And Hugo, in terms of Hezbollah's fighting strength, we've heard in the past about how formidable it is, and yet its leader has been taken out. Many of the top commanders have been taken out. Their communication systems have been obviously attacked in the last 2 weeks. What position is it in now to resist against an Israeli ground invasion, if that's what we are going to see?
Yeah, so we've seen that Hezbollah has remained defiant, but it has been weakened. It has been, damaged by 2 weeks of intense Israeli attacks. Its communications network has been disrupted. Its leadership has been decimated. Its infrastructure has taken a hit after extensive airstrikes here in Beirut, targeting Dahir, Hezbollah's base here in southern Beirut, also in southern Lebanon and in the Bekaa Valley, which are two strongholds here in Lebanon. So we still don't know, how Hezbollah and the capacity that Hezbollah has to coordinate a response against these Israeli attacks. But I've got to say that, there's also the impact on the population here in Lebanon, because we've seen that hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced because of these Israeli attacks. At least 1,000 people have been killed, and authorities are warning that, hospitals and shelters that have been, housing those displaced residents are under pressure. And yesterday, the Prime Minister, Najib Mikati, warned that Lebanon was facing a very dangerous situation.
And John Donison, obviously this comes all against the backdrop of a changing American political backdrop, with the US election due in about 5 weeks' time. Joe Biden has been a staunch supporter of the Israeli leadership, Mr. Netanyahu. This is all taking place, though, as we look to November. We don't know what level of support will come for Israel and what it does. Does that affect at all, do you think, the calculation of how the government is acting and its own timeline?
I think it probably does. I think there is an acceptance here in Israel that Prime Minister Netanyahu would prefer it if the next president of the United States was Donald Trump again, because he thinks he has better support for Israel. But I don't think we're going to see any major shift in policy from the Americans in the run-up to the election. If we ended up with a Kamala Harris presidency, perhaps there could be a shift in direction. But the truth of the matter is that, America, led by President Biden, has been putting huge pressure on Israel to try and get a ceasefire deal, not only with Hezbollah in Lebanon, but for months now in Gaza. And all that pressure has led to nothing. And I think the truth is Israel is doing what it thinks is necessary to protect its citizens, and no one within the international community, even the Americans, Israel's staunchest ally, can do anything to stop them.